What's up everybody, Coach Mills here, and HIKO, our favorite grandpa gamer, is ready to teach us how to destroy everyone in our ranked games, because we're going to be breaking down a VOD review of his, and we're going to be breaking down his really insane plays step by step, so that we can all learn how to be better players by one of the best players in the game. But if you want to see more VOD breakdowns just like this, if you want to level up your skills, become absolutely nutty at Valorant, then you need to go head over to the GameLeap.com website right now, and the link's down below. Don't miss out on this insane opportunity to make yourself the best player you could be. But without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Now, HIKO is playing RAZE on Bind, and I want you to really notice right off the bat where he is positioning on Bind. He is controlling U-Haul and playing around A mid on Bind defense, and this is the predominant position that pro players use RAZE on. The reason for this is you could easily pressure a rush push by easily bouncing paint shells off the wooden box, but you can also combo this with a Sage and pressure hookah by throwing a paint shells through the teleporter. It is very, very good to play this position. Now, on top of that, Sage wants to play here as well because of the slows that I mentioned before, and the reason that it's so important to put two heavy hitters here is because mid-A is such a powerful position, because not only does it allow you to wall off and do the Sage wall plant, but if you control that side of the map, it is incredibly difficult for enemies to retake because of all the natural structures. If the enemies control U-Haul, it makes it much more difficult to wrap around and control the entire area. Plus, people can play back towards the default of A mid. It is just a really bad area to give up completely, and if enemies ever get in a sticky situation, they can always just go through teleporter and quickly rotate through hookah. It gives them a lot of options, and that's why this position is so important to hold. And if you're playing RAZE or Sage, you should be holding this mid position as well. Typically, of course, you can have mix-ups here and there, but in general, this is the predominant position you want to take, just like HIKO playing here as well. Now, also, I want you to check his setup really quickly. He has Boombot, 1 blast, and light shields, and he's rocking the classic pistol, not the ghost. Now, this is pretty par for the course on RAZE because she has such powerful abilities, especially on pistol round. You really want to give yourself the most value and impact, and playing with your abilities is almost always better than playing with like a slightly better weapon. You will even see pros like forgo an AR for something like a Bulldog, as long as they could still buy all their abilities in full armor, because the abilities is the bread and butter of RAZE, of course. It's the most powerful thing, and you're gonna watch how he uses them to get a lot of value. Now, in this next engagement, watch how both sides of this side are smoked, but how HIKO forces them out or in front of hookah with his paint shells, throwing it into the back of the side, which will usually push any enemies either out or to the front of hookah. He then hits them with a ton of right clicks with pistol, and right clicking on pistol is really underrated, but HIKO does it a lot. He will use the classic pistol and jump right click over and over again. I mean, look how much damage he gets off on the enemy. This is really, really strong here because it's essentially free damage, and there's no way that enemies are guarding that angle because that's such a weird angle for someone to get hit by. They have to guard from elbow, they have to guard from left or right smoke, so they can't possibly be just watching for HIKO to be jumping over and over again from behind sight. And he gets like, I think it's over 100 damage on the enemies combined here, and it was really, really good. Definitely try this in your games, especially when you are just trying to put pressure on the enemy. Getting free damage is always great, especially in the early rounds. Now, in this next engagement, watch how the Omen smokes U-Haul. He smokes the exit of U-Haul, and HIKO will right off the bat take control of the space inside the smoke. This is really important because you don't want enemies to come inside the smoke and get a really powerful pivot inside of U-Haul, or maybe just hide in the smoke. So if you control it first, then if enemies try to push through, you'll be able to see them before they see you. You'll be able to punish them. So the second that they, smoke out to control that angle and push forward, it is a really good idea for you to take control of these smokes, and that is exactly what HIKO does. Now, next up, HIKO hears the Omen teleport, but he doesn't see him inside the immediate smoke, and guesses, or has a educated guess, that the Omen could have teleported on top and is wrapping around. He basically repositions, sees the Omen push up, and easily kills him. That is something that you should really be paying attention to. You can check the most immediate area and then imagine where the Omen would go. And when he saw the smoke on top of the cars, he knew that the Omen was most likely flanking behind him, and he easily punished that Omen, got a free pickoff and an upgrade of his weapon to the Phantom. Now, next up, the enemy does the classic Sage Wall plus plant, which is going to happen a lot in your games. I mean, it's a pretty obvious wall. It's less effective, of course, when enemies have all kinds of guns because they can easily break the wall, but usually when enemies are either low resource or you're on pistol round, this will happen really often. But watch how HIKO first bounces his paint shells off the back wall, gets damage on the enemy, puts pressure on them, and basically stalls for time. You should be doing this on RAZE and even learning the rollout spots. There's a lot of really simple rollout spots, and I feel like people just want to memorize like every perfect spot, but honestly, just doing really obvious bounces and simple bounces can get a ton of value on RAZE, and that is exactly what HIKO did. He did some free damage here and put some pressure on the enemy. Now, of course, you can't hear him, but something that he calls is he's gonna kill mollies on bomb, and what he's talking about is actually nano swarm. Now, the killjoy dies, but even if she didn't die, this is a very smart play for him to use his paint shells to clear out any nano swarm near the bomb so that they can defuse. This is pretty much your responsibility. If you have AoE, this is exactly what you need to be doing to clear off Spike. I can't tell you how many times in games, even watching high level matches, I've seen people die to nano swarm, and it's really easy to avoid if you have something like blast pack or even shock dart on Sova. It is your job to clear the spikes off. It just is so much easier for you to just use one ability and clear it off than you like really looking in the crevices of whatever, trying to destroy whatever nano swarm you find, because if you spend that much time doing it, you might not find it in time, you could get punished or swanked. It is so much more time efficient and you don't even have to worry about it anymore, so make sure you try to do this in each and every one of your games, and I'm sure your teammates are gonna thank you for it so they can stop freaking dying to nano swarm. Now, unfortunately though, even after all of this, due to some sort of miscommunication, someone didn't stick to defuse, and HIKO is in an unwinnable scenario with the molly on bomb. He can't defuse in time, but I want you to notice something kind of interesting that HIKO does. He has his blast pack, so he really waits for the brimstone even as the bomb is ticking down. He waits for that brimstone to rush to TP, kills him, and then uses his blast pack to get him to TP before the bomb detonates. Now, this really works because brimstone would assume that he just left back to CT, because at that point, it didn't really make sense for him to be anywhere else, but HIKO kind of circumvented this because he had that mobility. Now, your first response might be thinking that this kill is absolutely irrelevant, but it gives you ult charge, gives you money, and it really hurts the enemy eco. Getting exit picks like this is worth quite a bit of value, and it's something that you should try to be going for, especially if you can get it in a way or set it up in a way where the enemy is not taking a fair engagement with you. They're simply running away, and it's a really easy kill. You don't have to worry about like maybe winning the duel or maybe not. You just get to kill them, get all those advantages, hurt the enemy, and that's pretty much all you have to do to give you more eco advantage down the road. Now, in this next engagement, watch as HIKO ends up in a 2v3 scenario and what he does to kind of level the playing field. Now, I want you to notice how he instantly pressures this ice wall. And a lot of people think, hey, I shouldn't be pressuring the ice wall because then it tells enemies where I'm at. Well, the thing is, even if enemies know where you're at, if the ice wall stays up, then they know that that's one less angle that they have to guard, and it puts a lot at ease or less pressure on them. What you should be trying to do, even if you plan to rotate to elbow, you should always be pressuring out ice walls when you're trying to do a retake. Even if you're not planning to push that way, it really allows your other teammates to get more line of sight. It makes them really worry about that side. It just makes it a lot harder for them to defend. So every time you see an ice wall like this, instantly try to break it, almost always. Now, I want you to see how HIKO kind of sweeps and checks these angles one at a time. He checks that left corner, then he sweeps across, sees the Sage on top, calls her position while he understands where she's at. He then will fire at the top side, doesn't kill the Sage, but notice how he instantly swings to this right side of boxes. The fire itself elicited a response, but HIKO was ready for it. He catches the enemy RAZE off guard and finishes her with a wall bang. Now, I'm gonna point out to another instance where he does this with intent later, so make sure you stick around until then, but this is really, really powerful to either be ready for someone to respond to you firing somewhere else, or fire somewhere else on purpose and use that to punish them as they peek the angle. Now, notice how he starts to spray at the Sage, but really just loses control completely, and he will dip out for a second, reset his aim, and then he goes back in for the headshot. Now, there's a lot to take away here. The patience, understanding when your spray is just completely out of control, and instead of committing, he just backed out, reset it, and then went back in for the spray. This is something that you should really try to do. Sometimes you'll mess up. Sometimes you won't have that perfect spray, but realizing that you could just take a step out, a step back in, and have that first shot accuracy again, That is exactly what you want to be trying to do in your games to win more consistent gunfights even when you mess up initially. Now, before we talk about this next engagement, I want you to know this really strong thing that his teammates do that you should be doing in your games because it's really, really strong. It's like one of the strongest things that you could be doing in this meta right now. Watch as Jet actually is opping an aggressive angle A mid, and the second he fires, the Sage will wall off after the shot. This makes it nearly impossible for the enemy to chase, and if you can get that raw numbers advantage on the table, you're just going to be winning more games because getting that first blood matters so much. You get to wall also because you know enemies are there because you're Jet fired, so you can gather that info, and as a Jet player, you can hold much riskier angles. This is just great across the board. If you are a Jet player, say, hey Sage, can you wall off my shot? This is really good to be doing on like defense in split mid. It's really good bind mid. There's just a lot of different areas that it's very powerful in. You could even do it in Haven mid. I mean, it's just great to do. Definitely try to set this up in your games. You're gonna be able to play way more aggressive, get a free kill, wall it off, make it impossible to get punished. Just great across the board. You don't even have to invest Tailwind. Now, on top of that, check out this next engagement where after the wall went up, HIKO uses his blast pack to damage that edge corner. He gets a little bit of damage, but also he creates a gap in this wall that he's gonna capitalize. Now, HIKO's gonna use this and look as he fires a small burst as a fake, and then he rebursts the swinging killjoy. This is exactly what I was talking about before, where firing can actually bait an enemy, and that is exactly what he does here. The enemies think, hey, he's firing, he's obviously paying attention to something else, he's not gonna pay attention to me when I swing this. But if you do that on purpose with intent, you can set up in a way where enemies swing you and you just shut them down just like HIKO does. It is actually a really cheeky thing to do, but you can do this all the time in your games. You can really bait people out. If you know someone is nearby or you suspect, you can like fire at the wall or fire at like a breakable object or whatever, wait for them to swing, punish them, get a free kill out of it. It's really good to circumvent that perception of you doing something else and trick an enemy and then basically punish them for trying to swing you when you're firing. Now in this next really crazy team fight, HIKO kind of pops off and he does some really interesting things that we need to break down, but then he also messes up, and we're gonna talk about why this happened and what you can do about it. So notice how he throws the bot down and he quickly follows behind it to take the space it secures. The bot is making sure that no one's holding close, pushing up, taking those angles, and he just follows right behind it so that he can take that space, take that really good positioning right after his boombot takes that space, which is something that's really good for point retakes. Then he will step out of the smoke, he really taps that stage as she's falling, transfers to the killjoy, and because the killjoy doesn't have her weapon out, even though he doesn't kill her right away, he just commits to this spray, doing a certain amount of damage per second that's not like max damage, but it's doing enough, kills her, and gets a fat double kill. Now, the thing that he does next I really like, and he will use his pack to instantly reposition back to the site, and then he'll reload. This is something that you should try to do a lot. He knows that the area is secure, he doesn't know what other area is secure, and a lot of times, when you get 1 or even 2 kills, enemies are going to be looking to trade out with you, and he only had 5 bullets left in his gun, so he used his blast pack to reposition him, and that is exactly what you should be trying to do. Make sure that you're thinking about how much ammo you have, what enemies are likely to do after you got kills, so doing this basically makes him safe, lets him reload, and set up a next engagement without getting punished, which is really good, and it's something that you should be trying to replicate. Remember this because it is just really great fundamentals. Now, he does take a close duel with a Brim. He gets tagged for a lot of damage, but does win that duel just to out-aiming the enemy. But this is where everything goes wrong. He throws his paint shells and swings out, and unfortunately, he tries to blast pack himself out where the grenade is still gonna hit him. He takes some damage and dies. Now, he kind of went a little bit too fast for his own good here. He could have perhaps changed directions, maybe waited a second before he actually blasted himself up, or even jumped to get a little bit further distance. Now, he did so many different things right here, so I'm not gonna fault him for this, but sometimes it's better to actually slow things down. Instead of trying to take a really fast engagement with this RAZE, he didn't really have to speed up this quickly. he could have just assessed the situation, maybe waited it out a little bit. If he would have actually waited just a second, the enemy RAZE would have threw his grenade. He would have knew where he was, and he could have made a better game plan while still dodging this paint shells. Sometimes you have to move so fast and you kind of get into the zone, but other times it's better to really slow things down and try to think about what is the most effective play to win this when I only have so little HP. But ultimately, HIKO dominated this game. He popped off, had very few deaths, and just had this really good decision making every single time that we could all learn from. But speaking of good decision making, the best decision that you can make right now is going and checking out the GameLeap website. And all jokes aside, I'm serious, we have in-depth VODs just like this, if not better, by top tier Radiant talent like our resident Radiant player Tanner. We have mechanical guides, map, positioning, any kind of thing that you need in order to improve at Valorant, we got it. So do yourself a favor and go check us out in the links down below. But thank you so much for coming by. Ask any question you have in the comments down below and we'll be sure to respond. But that's all we got for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time.